Hi, welcome to Week in Review. I'm Phil O'Connor, the Live Enterprise Director. This is where we catch up on some of the stories making news this week. I'm joined by a stellar cast again this week. I've got Josh Delaney from the Enterprise team, Brian Sharp, our sports editor, and my old friend from business, Don McCoy. Josh, let's get to a kind of a troubling story that we had. It's been online and will be online for our News OK viewers soon. About an incident involving an Oklahoma City police officer and a bicyclist. Tell us a little bit about that story and what kind of fallout has been from that whole affair.
Yeah, the police officer got a call that there was a woman on a bicycle with it was basically your typical call out. Somebody was in a neighborhood that, somebody who lived there thought maybe they shouldn't have been, that kind of a thing. And call up the police, and an officer shows up and he tells this woman on a bicycle to pull over. She's completely shocked. She has no idea what's going on. In fact, it was the first day that she was on her bicycle to go to work, and she's cutting through this neighborhood. Well, within about a minute, she's in the back of a squad police vehicle with handcuffs on. The video is taken off. It's gone viral because not only was she quickly put into the back of the vehicle, but the officer claimed that, and you can see this on the video, claimed that the woman was using her license as a weapon, essentially, and that he had felt threatened. And as folks have been watching this video, and as different reports have come out, it was speculated that he had entered in a false report on an initial log about the call. So this has gone viral. It's been out there for a while. And a lot of folks are upset by it.
Well, and then essentially what happened is she's riding her bike, he pulls her over, she is caught completely off guard, he begins to question her, she begins to ask, why am I being stopped? And essentially it escalates pretty quickly to the point where she is in the back of the patrol car. He then goes back to the station and writes in his call log that she had used her license and had flung it at him, used it as a weapon, I believe is how he described it.
Yes.
But then the video comes out. Mm-hmm. And what the video shows is that's not what happened at all. That she didn't throw her license at him, that she didn't use it in a threatening manner. Mm-hmm. And so then it went to the chief about, and the question was, well, is he going to be disciplined for apparently filing a report that is not indicative of the facts that we can see on the video? And what was the chief's response?
Well, the chief said that what his officer did clearly was not appropriate. The chief said he was not happy about the cyclist being in the back of a police vehicle and handcuffed. Clearly, a driver's license, unless it's in the hands of a skilled fighter, cannot be used as a weapon, and it wasn't used as a weapon here, the chief said. But this didn't rise to the level of a harsh disciplinary offense, and in fact, as is common in a lot of these cases, police departments aren't going to talk about any discipline measures that do take place.
And actually what they've told us is that there was some discipline administered, if I remember correctly, but it didn't rise to the level which under the State Open Records Act has to be recorded or reported, right, yeah, which is essentially, dismissal, demotion, loss of pay, loss of rank, something of that nature.
Right, that type of discipline, yeah.
But then the problem is, or not the problem, but then the conversation again started in the community about, well, can an officer simply lie and receive no punishment?
Well, that's where we get some radio silence. So, but the people in that neighborhood, and actually people all over the U.S. are very upset about it.
Yeah, so. A lot of comments on it. It's a really interesting story. If you haven't read it, it's online. Check it out. Really interesting story. We've got another troubling story in Murray County, which people may have read about this gentleman at a church camp down there accused of raping a 13-year-old girl, and then the controversy started when the sentence was handed down.
Yes, this was a story that was broken by my colleague Randy Ellis, followed up by Nolan Clay. And the 13-year-old girl was raped up at the church camp in Falls Creek, and the rapist ended up getting, he had 3 felonies on him, but he ended up getting probation because of, I don't want to use deal in the worst sense of the word, but because of some brokering by lawyers on both sides. But in any event, this has caused some great outrage in Murray County, and this is another one of those stories that has traveled all over the world. And we went down and visited Murray County to talk to some of the residents this week to get their reaction to it, and they're not happy about it at all. In the wake of it, the assistant district attorney who worked on the deal has resigned, and there are residents down there that want the courthouse cleaned up down there.
Yeah, it's a great story. That's in our Sunday edition. It's a really troubling story, and like I said, you talked to a lot of the folks down there, and they are not happy, obviously. Is there any chance that, is there anything that can be done at this point in that case, or is this pretty much set in stone?
It's pretty much set in stone. I've talked to people on background that were close to that case, and they've told me that they do not want to talk about that deal anymore. Yeah. So the fire upon them has been very, very heavy, and I think folks that were possibly, that were involved in that case are going to lay low for a while. But
you got
the residents
folks calling for the removal of the judge, for the removal of the district attorney. There's a lot of people that want heads to roll. That's for sure.
Yeah, and those are elected positions, but they've been unopposed positions during the last couple of campaign cycles down there. So maybe Murray County residents will have an opportunity to voice their opinions at the ballot box.
Right.
So.
Okay. Speaking of head rolling, Don, SandRidge, changes at SandRidge this week. What's going on there?
Yeah, the CEO is out, as is the chief financial officer, and essentially the company, which is in the midst of some of their shareholders are very unhappy with the company, and they've been unhappy with the leadership, and among those shareholders, major shareholders, is Carl Icahn, who's known for this kind of thing. But there was an offer that came from a Tulsa company, which also has a big shareholder that is in common with SandRidge. The Tulsa company offered to merge with SandRidge, even though it's a smaller company than SandRidge. But the CEO of that company said, under this proposal, I would become the CEO of the merged company. And then yesterday, SandRidge announced that their CEO, James Bennett, was no longer with the company. They didn't say if he had resigned or been fired. We assume that he didn't leave voluntarily, but we don't know that. Makes a big difference on how much money he gets. If he's fired without cause, he gets $12 million. If he's fired as part of a change of control at the company, he gets $26 million. If he left voluntarily, he gets nothing. So there's a lot going on there. You've had this long-running deal with the upset shareholders. You have this merger agreement. And another aspect of that we're really interested in is if this merger does take place, which these major shareholders seem to back, and the CEO becomes the gentleman in Tulsa with Mid-States, does SandRidge move to Tulsa? In which case you have an Oklahoma City downtown skyscraper that will be emptied. So that's another issue that we're looking at. So it's quite a turmoil that's going on at this local energy company.
And Icahn has been no fan of Bennett, apparently, basically over compensation that he's received in the past when the company wasn't doing exceptionally well.
Right.
And payments to the former head of the company as well, right?
Right. Icahn complained about when Tom Ward was ousted as part of a shareholder revolt. They made a huge settlement to him, tens of millions of dollars. Bennett took over as CEO, and eventually, when the oil prices collapsed, SandRidge ended up filing for bankruptcy, and Bennett was the CEO when the company went bankrupt. He led the company out of bankruptcy. They reorganized, wrote off a lot of debt, like $4 billion in debt, and continued to operate. It also wiped out all of the current shareholders at the time. When a public company goes bankrupt, the shareholders are at the end of the line. They get nothing. And as they came out of bankruptcy, the board decided to pay Mr. Bennett a big bonus for leading the company out of bankruptcy, and Icahn pointed out he's the guy who led the company into bankruptcy. So he was pretty upset about that.
Yeah, I know that when you leave, it won't be a difference between $2 million and $10 million.
No, it will not.
But we don't want you to leave. Please stay.
Okay, thank you.
Ryan, let's talk about the Thunder. Trading deadline came and went.
Yeah, it was an interesting trade deadline as far as the Thunder's concerned because they didn't do anything, which is very atypical for the Thunder. Usually Sam Presti has deals and deals and deals up his sleeves on that day. But it was kind of a different market this year. You only had really one team making a lot of waves in free agency on the trade deadline. Of course, that was the Cleveland Cavs, who completely overhauled their roster. But a lot of other teams are going to wait for the buyout market. A lot of veteran players will be bought out of their contracts and then in the coming weeks so that they can pursue joining a playoff contending team. So you've got players like Tony Allen, Marco Bellinelli, Joe Johnson, guys like that are likely going to be bought out of their contracts and then be looking to join a playoff contender. So I think that's where the Thunder's going to try to make some moves. They've got a roster spot. And of course, they need to shore up a couple things. You've lost Andre Robertson for the year to injury, so your defense is lacking, and just a lot of general inconsistency. I mean, they go and beat Golden State by 25, but then they lose to the Lakers. I mean, so they've been back and forth pretty much for the past several weeks. But I think over the next couple of weeks, you'll see them try to make some moves in that market.
Don, what do they need?
Andre Robertson would be nice. Yeah, I mean, of these guys that might be available, I think Tony Allen is probably the closest thing you're going to find, which is, he's no longer the grind father because he's 30-something.
Yeah, he's 35.
35, but if he can give you 10, 12, 14 minutes of good defense so Paul George can get a little rest, I think that would be helpful.
And folks here have plenty of history with Tony Allen. I mean, the Thunder's had several massive playoff series against Memphis. Of course, he went to Oklahoma State, went to the Final Four with them. So people here are very familiar with Tony Allen, and he might be that defensive help that they need to fill in for Robertson's spot.
Yeah, they thought they had it turned around there for a minute and had it going in the right direction, and just when they seemed to get it going, they seemed to stumble a little bit.
Where are we going to hold the first round victory parade at?
Your neighborhood?
Let's talk about people who probably have giant smiles on their face this week, though. It's signing week, and for kids, it's the biggest day of their lives in a lot of cases.
It is. Now, this one is very different than it has been in the past. College football implemented an early signing period in December. So, especially locally for Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, signed a vast majority of their classes back in December. So there really wasn't much drama as far as OU and OSU goes. Matter of fact, OSU was done on signing day by about 9 a.m., which is not typical. Oklahoma had a couple kids that were committing later in the day. OSU picked up 2. OU had 2 or 3, a couple of linemen. But it closed out those classes. Now they can start looking towards next year. OU ends up with what ends up being ranked as a top 10 class. A lot of 4-star players, really good players that'll contribute pretty quick. Oklahoma State was about a top 30 class, which is about average for them. They've kind of gone up and down. But again, tried to fill a lot of holes that they had. They signed a quarterback. They actually just landed a quarterback transfer from Hawaii that is expected to come in and compete for a starting job really quick. And then on the local level, you had a lot of kids that are signing with D2 and JUCO schools. I mean, there were a few Division I kids that signed this week, but it was more, this one I think was cool because it was more about those kids signing with D2 schools or JUCOs and the ones signing for other sports than football. Mm-hmm. You have kids signing for softball, rowing, baseball, I mean, everything else. And so those kids got a little bit of the spotlight that they haven't gotten in the past because they were under the shadow of those football players.
Yeah, and Jenny had a beautiful story about the young quarterback from
CHA out at Del City.
That chose to stay home, or
yeah,
closer to home.
It was a great story. It was in our Thursday paper. If you haven't read it yet, it's just picking it up. Jim Beckel had great photos from that ceremony. And really, that's what this was all. We had another story in our Thursday paper, or our Friday paper, sorry, about a Edmond soccer player that's kind of the last in a long line of this family that's put soccer players all over the country. His sister played in the World Cup for Nigeria. She was an OSU soccer player. He'll play D1 soccer now. So it was really a cool change to see a lot of these other kids that didn't get the spotlight at this time around.
Yeah, it was great stories, and we had a lot of them all week long, and I'm sure we'll have more great stories this weekend, next week, every day online, every day in the paper. Check us out. We'll see you next week.